So we broadcast live here, push the mics when you want to speak. And the most important thing to note is the fabulous Julie sitting at the back of the room. Everybody look at Julie. So Julie's first meeting.
Blushes, and then we all go back to work.
That's it. So Julie's first meeting. So we're just in a position where let's go with the flow. You've done loads of preparation, haven't you?
Yes.
I'm nervous. I've never done it before, but we're an easy bunch, aren't we? So we'll take it easy. And obviously, hopefully it'll go well. And online we've got Richard and we've got Becky as well. And I think Steve's going to join us as well. Are you the new and improved Steve, Richard?
I don't know about improved, certainly not. I don't know about new either, to be very honest.
Okay, so we've got two joining online, but I don't think we've got any members of the public yet. However, everybody ready to start? Yeah, okay. Do you want to go live on the broadcast then? Give me a wave when it's. Oh, we're live. There you go. Right. So, good evening, everybody, and welcome to a meeting of the Safer Communities Subcommittee on Monday, the 15th of November. Welcome, members. I see we've got no members of the public in attendance. Is everybody familiar with the evacuation procedure, or do you want me to lead you through it?
Familiar, thank you.
Familiar? Okay, then. Well, thanks much indeed. Okay, and that takes us to agenda item number 2, which is apologies for absent or members aware of business. So, do we have any apologies?
Just Councillor Farrow, Councillor Osborne, and potentially Councillor Parsons.
Yes, okay. Then
Noted, Chair.
No, okay. Well, hopefully the colleagues will be able to make it. That takes us on to agenda item number 3, which is disclosure of pecuniary and non-pecuniary interests. Does anybody have any pecuniary or non-pecuniary interests or anything on the agenda? No? Okay, thank you very much indeed. We're flying through this. It takes us to agenda item number 4 now, which is the minutes of the previous meeting. Now, this was obviously a fantastic meeting that I never chaired. So, Councillor Clues, you were in the chair, and can I possibly ask you to just do the minutes for accuracy? And if you're happy and everybody's happy, I'll agree them.
I will, Chair. H1. H2. That's it, I think, isn't it, Chair?
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Members, is everybody happy with the accuracy of those minutes?
Would somebody like to move them?
Moved.
A second.
Thank you indeed. Councillor Clues, will you sign those at the end of the meeting? Thank you very much indeed. Thank you. Julie, do we have any matters arising from that meeting?
I think they're picked up in the update reports.
Okay, brilliant. Thank you very much indeed. I see them. Right. Okay, so public participation. We've had no representatives online. Can I confirm that? Yeah, and we've not received any written questions or anything? No? Okay, so we'll end as quick as we started for public engagement, which takes us on to the main agenda items now. So agenda item number 6, paper in your pack, which is on the fly tipping progress report. Julie, over to you.
Thanks, Chair. So today I just really want to update you.
Microphone, Julie. That's it, green light on.
Just really want to update you on the report. I know Richard Doctor's here as well, so there might be some other information that he wants to contribute to this. I'm just going to take you through very briefly through the headings, and then if you've got any questions at the end, then hopefully we'll both be able to answer them. So I just want to draw your attention to under incidents, section 3, there was 447 recorded incidents between April and September 2021. And the main areas of fly tipping were around construction, demolition, excavation waste and white goods. The 3 hotspots have been Foley Lane, Baddesley, Grange Road, Hartshill, Packington Lane, Coleshill. And I just wanted to just share with you a few details around what we actually do in terms of those fly tipping and you know, what's our response to that. So there's 2 different divisions within the council that are employed to actually look at those hotspots. So Streetscape go out and do various work. One of the things they do is actually put cameras in those locations where they are hotspots, and we've got 5 cameras to date. And in your report, it says that there's 12,000 photos and 12,000 videos that have already been accumulated from those 5 locations. So there's quite a lot of information generated. Signs go up in each of the locations as well, warning people about fly tipping. And then the other side that our council department get involved with is the investigation side. So environmental health, pollution team have basically investigated or looked at 46 incidents during 2021, 22, and I guess that's still current at the current time. One thing we're aware of there, that will increase, the work will increase once we've got also more staff with environmental health. I suppose the important thing is, whilst this is our response to fly tipping, I think the main thing is to realise that it's a multi-agency approach and there's a range of people involved. And we've had meetings between the Environment Agency, National Farmers Union, the Inspector for Safer Neighbourhoods, and the Rural Crime Officer to actually look at this work and draw down or identify a number of actions that need to take place. So you've got details of a whole range of actions listed in the report, including campaigns. So one of the campaigns is the Scrap campaign, and that's a social media campaign. We'll look at different types of fly tipping. So it's just to be clear that, you know, there's a lot of people involved from ourselves and our partner organisations. And I think the intention is to meet regularly to look at the fly tipping issues with our partner organisations. And I think Richard and some of his team attend those meetings. So it's just to also say, you know, how far this goes in terms of the Longley, and I think it's been reported at previous meetings, we've actually got a public space protection order in place. Now that needs to be reviewed. So at the last meeting, I think Robert highlighted that we needed to do some work around that. So that's taken place. That's now back in place, and there is consideration. And Richard might be able to explain it a little bit more. But there is consideration for 2 other possible sites. So this is Tamworth Road, Polesworth, on the B5000. And then the Ryfield Lane, Wishaw, which is the lane right opposite the Belfry Hotel. So we might look at, I've spoken to our solicitor, but we might look at, you know, developing a public space protection order for those 2 sites because there's persistent fly tipping. So in terms of finances, it's really just to say that we have got a budget, or Richard's got a budget, and at the moment we've still got an underspend of 26,000, which, you know, can help us with the work around fly tipping. And so I think the good news stories are there is a number of interventions taking place. We're doing some really good work around this. We want to do more work around this going forward with our environmental health teams in terms of investigations. I know there's been some good cases that have gone to court. And we probably, I think it was again raised in the last meeting, we need to do more around publicising some of our efforts around that. I think the number is something like 130% of fly tipping grew during the COVID period. So we're looking forward to a period when we go back to some normality. So is there any questions at all about that?
Yeah, okay. Well, thanks, Julie. Did you guys on the internet hear Julie's update? Yeah. Okay, brilliant. Right. Before we do open up to questions, Richard, have you got anything to add to that update from Julie?
Not really, Chair. I think Julie's covered off most of the main points. I think her hope that fly tipping will return to some form of normality is borne out slightly in the statistics. We're down just over a third from the same period last year. Just another couple of things to raise that I think members have mentioned previously in this forum is that there's been Concern expressed about whether the restrictions at household waste recycling centres have had a knock-on effect on fly tipping in our area and more widely in Warwickshire. And you'll know, Chair, that I've raised that, and Councillor Margaret Bell has raised that with the County Council over the last few months. I'd like to think it's as a result of our interventions, but they've opened up more slots for booking. They've made booking available on the same day. In fact, within 15 minutes of going onto the site. And I believe that they are looking at the wider issue of whether they can go back to some form of visiting in person without booking in advance, although that's yet to be determined. But certainly there have been some changes following pressure brought to bear by this council and others in terms of household waste recycling centres. So that's good news. The scrap campaign, which Julie mentioned, yes, we're working on that at the moment. We hope to get something out publicity-wise on that very, very shortly. Olivia Childs is working on the campaign publicity for that at the moment. So that's very much in train. And we have had some good images captured on some of our covert CCTV, and we're working with local police, we're working in environmental health. And I'm confident that some of the stuff we've got there with the multi-agency approach that we're taking is going to lead to some successful prosecutions on a couple of our very persistent offence locations. So we'll keep members posted on that as well. But yes, any questions, we'll do our best to answer them, Chair.
So now that issue of 12,000 photos and 12,000 videos is fantastic, isn't it, really? And as is the success of the Public Play Protection Order, which, if you remember, was an innovative intervention led by this borough to tackle the problem, and it has been effective. So, members, open to questions. So I've got Kerry, I've got Denise, I've got Major in that order. So Kerry, sorry, and I've got Joe.
Yeah, just a question. Grange Hill came up on that report, and I'm just wondering why, when we've got two cameras, one at Grange Hill Road itself and the other one at the Clock Bridge, why they're coming up, because if those cameras are being effective, they should be picking up and there should be prosecutions on those pretty quickly, I would have thought.
Yeah, I mean, the reason that they're there is because they're the hotspot locations. And off the top of my head, I can't tell councillors whether we've caught anything on those cameras. I'll have to go back and find out, which I will, and I'll let you know what we discovered in those locations. But yes, the reason we're monitoring there is because they're seeing activity, and I'm hopeful, therefore, that we'll be able to get some good enforcement information from the cameras that are at those locations. But I'll find out the details and I'll get back to members on that, Chair.
Thank you very much indeed. Richard, is that okay, Kerry? Denise?
Thank you, Chair. 2 points. First, I like the initiative about stopping, checking flatbeds after a certain time at night. I don't think I need that. Sorry, Chair. And the other point, because I know that Rural Watch has done this with horse boxes, and that they get stopped, and they pick quite a few up by finding out that they've been stolen and things like that. The other point from Richard is 5.2. It says there's been 5 incidents, but 1 was poor quality. Have we had any prosecutions from any of those through you, Chair?
It takes a while to get from gathering evidence to court, so no prosecutions as yet. But as I said, I'm very confident that we've had. We say 5 locations. We've produced multiple evidence for at least 1 location that's been a persistent problem for us, and that evidence has been followed up with other police-led activity as well. So I'm very confident, and I won't say what that location is now because it's part of an ongoing investigation, but I'm very confident that in at least 1 of those locations will lead to prosecution, and it's one of these which we will certainly be pursuing through the court. So it will take some time. It's certainly not something we deal with through a fixed penalty notice, because the nature of the offence is serious enough that it needs to be dealt with through the court system, Chair. But we'll update members on that as we get closer to court dates and that sort of thing.
Thank you, Richard. Thanks, Chair.
Great to hear about people being prosecuted. We've had some great success so far on it. Major?
Is this on?
No.
No. one of the comments I'm getting from the public is that the fly tipping centres, they can't get to them. They're not accessible as they used to be. Okay, over the pandemic, you said it went up 130%. But I know you're saying county, you got a book in, you can go in 15 minutes, but I don't know, the borough have to publicise that, or county have to it, because I think the reason is because they're not going to do recycling. They're just tipping it anywhere they can. And the other question was, is there like serial fly tippers, you think? That's what all they do, is go around dumping rubbish.
Richard?
Yeah, we can certainly, thanks, Chair, we can certainly promote the work that's happening in terms of the booking slots being made available at the Household Waste Recycling Centre. So I know the county done some work, but it doesn't hurt for us to do some work as well, and we'll also feed that into to the other campaigning work we're doing around fly tipping to make sure that people are aware of the opening times and the booking system. It's booked through Eventbrite. And there's an app, so you can put an app on your phone that will allow you just to go straight through to that and book an available slot, within 10 or 15 minutes of going on. You can be presenting yourself at Lower House Farm with a booked slot available and throwing stuff out the back of your car. So that is working better than it was before. Albeit I hear what Councillor Singh's saying about the fact that, it's possibly not perfect, but it is certainly better, I think, than it was before. What was the second question? Household Waste Recycling Centres.
Is that all they do?
Yeah, serial fly tippers. Yeah, it's one of the reasons we adopt a multi-agency approach. It's one of the reasons we work with the Environment Agency. The Environment Agency has links into serious and organised crime and an environmental crime unit that's been established in the last 12 or 18 months or so. That's there specifically to look at this sort of thing. Persistent fly tipping and illegal waste sites and that sort of thing are very much organised crime activity rather than just ad hoc, and sort of can't get in, so I'm going to dump it in this lay-by or in this lane. I think that we work very closely with the police and very closely with the Environment Agency when we identify things like this. And I think Julie made reference to the Middleton trailer incident a couple of years back. Clearly serious and organised crime. We've had dumping on lanes, which has clearly been 40-foot Arctics and rolling floors that have been that's not stuff that's been picked up by people going door to door. Serious and organised crime activity, and we work with the police and we work with the Environment Agency on that. I've got to say that one of the ones that we've got evidence for is, we think, linked to serious and organised crime and is persistent offenders. It's mentioned in the actions. It's one of the things we want to pick up with our colleagues at places like Trading Standards, DVSA, and Department for Transport and the police, is around looking at stopping sort of unlicensed carriers or those purported to be licensed carriers. So we're keen to pick that up with the county council and the police and others, because we think there's work to be done there in terms of stopping those serial offenders. And we do report to our colleagues in the police where we see patterns of behaviour. So waste of a similar nature, dumped in a similar location, dumped on a repeated cycle. We report that. We have good links into the police, and they're very keen to talk to us about those things and follow them up. So again, it's another area where we're aware that it's happening, we're aware it's a pattern, and we work with the police to see if we can get to the bottom of that.
Is that right, yeah, Joe?
Brilliant, thank you. I've got a number of questions, some of which have already been kind of touched on. It's kind of around obviously it's brilliant that we've got evidence of 5 tips and that we're working, the CCTVs are working. But the question is about the hotspots and whether they're actually being the effective deterrent that we would expect them to be, and whether or not we've got any modelling or intending to do any modelling around the reductions in those hotspots and whether we're actually alleviating the problem. And we also talked a lot last time about whether in alleviating those problems, because of the nature of CCTV being so micro-local, whether we are just moving it on to somewhere else. I also am aware that one of the problems with the tips is that the other councils are still having restricted visits, so we can't essentially open our doors until other councils, and wondered if we're working with other councils as well as other agencies to kind of manage that. And I did have another one, but I've forgotten. Do I see those two now and I'll see if I remember?
Yeah, okay, we'll come back to you next one.
Thanks.
Richard?
Yeah, I mean, in terms of hotspot locations, it's you know, our aim through and the issue of whether we're moving the problem around. It's clearly, ideally, we want to identify fly tippers, prosecute them, find them, stop them doing it. But the reason why we are quite overt at times in putting the signage up, saying that we're carrying out surveillance, publicising the fact that we're doing it, and having this meeting, you know, in an open forum, you know, doing the scrap campaigns, doing the waste duty of care campaigns, and all those sorts of things, is to try and encourage people's behaviour to change. It's far more likely that we'll be successful doing that than it is capturing people, because for all the 12,000 images and the thousands of hours of CCTV footage that we capture, it takes an awful long time to go through all that, and you capture very, very little on it. In honesty, it's you know, because you know, 1,000 fly tips a year is a lot, but you know, it's asking an awful lot for us to capture much evidence that can be used through deployment of cameras at specified locations. So it's why we look at doing this, you know, through a number of different measures. It's why public space protection orders are important. You know, it's been incredibly successful at Philongly. It's why we're looking to see whether we can produce that, replicate that in a couple of other different areas. It's why we do far more advertising that we're doing CCTV surveillance in areas where we're not actually doing it, to try and persuade people not to do it. We will inevitably move the problem on as much as we eradicate it. And my view has always been that, well, if we're successful in doing that, then it's over to the next council it moves on to make sure that they're as successful at doing that, so that ultimately fly tippers get fed up with trying to do it and do something else instead. It's one of those where you won't eradicate it, I think, through prosecution. You'll just make it so difficult and frustrating for them that they'll do something else instead is the ultimate aim. So we're doing a number of different things. We need to do more publicity and promotion. We need to do more awareness raising. We do need to keep working with other agencies, and you're right that the county are looking to see what household waste recycling centres or other areas are doing. And it's the usual mixed bag, from no restrictions at all to far more restrictions than we've got. I think Warwickshire's sort of a bit of a middle ground. Others have been far more restrictive, but are starting to open up. Some put restrictions in and there and opened up again before the end of the pandemic. Some are still in a fairly lockdown scenario. Others are pretty much back to where they were. And I think that the county are keeping an eye on that. We've got the Warwickshire Waste Partnership meeting coming up in a few weeks' time, and this will almost certainly be discussed again. And pressure will be put on the county to open up more, I'm sure. I'll report back what their response is, Chair. I think those were the three questions that Councillor Gosling raised, but I'm sure she'll remind me of anything I haven't covered.
I have remembered those.
Is it a good question, or is it
I would rate it. You know,
it's a good question, then you can ask.
I'll only ask the good questions.
you tell me after I've asked it whether it's worthy of your time. It was about the sustainability of public protection orders, and obviously they are quite costly, going through the courts, having to review them on a regular basis. Is it a sustainable model? If we're looking at maybe now 3 areas and moving on to kind of other areas potentially in the future, is it something, you know, not borough-wide, but is it something that we can actually use long term? And then I think my other questions were...
Hang on.
That was a good question, Jodie.
Yeah, it was a good question. I think you can have a gold star for that. So sustainability, then, really an interesting point.
Yeah, I think I would answer by saying yes. I do believe that public space protection orders for this sort of activity are sustainable because of the way that we do them. And you'll be aware of the fact it takes a long time to get from identifying an area to putting a public space protection order or a gating order in place. And the reason that it takes a long time is that we have to be absolutely certain that the area we're looking at is suitable for a gating order or a public space protection order that seeks to limit access to prevent fly tipping. We have to make sure that it doesn't stop other activity that's lawful from taking place in that area. It has to have the impact that we hope it will have and not have any negative impacts. And so we take our time. We work out exactly what we want to do, how we want to do it, and how that's going to be implemented. We talk in great detail with local landowners and users and the people who need to access those areas. We consult widely, we consult for a length of time, and we bring the results of those consultations that happen not just with the local community, but with key stakeholders, highways authority, parish and town councils, as I said, local users, local landowners, and only when we think it's absolutely right and can be delivered in the way that will give us the outcome that we want, do we go back to this committee and say, we think this will work, will you endorse it? And then we monitor it, and then we consult again, and you'll be aware that the public space protection order for Longley needs to be tweaked. You'll be aware of design tweaks. When we have, for example, the Forlongley gates, we have local horse riders coming back to us and saying, it's all very well you're doing what you're doing, but have you thought about doing it in a different way, which may be better for us? And we tweak our design to make that better for local bridle path users and and horse riders. So it works if you consult with the community and you get it right and you pick the right location. The reason why we're only looking at another 2 is because those are the locations where we think PSPOs and gating orders will work or might work. There are a lot of other areas where they simply won't, because you need to maintain access, or they're impossible to gate, or it's just not the right solution for those areas. But where we do think it's the right solution, I think they work and I think they're sustainable. And I think Forlongley's been a success. If we can replicate that in the other couple of places we're looking at, then I'll be very happy.
Okay, Richard, thank you very much indeed. Let's just summarise that and say great news that the 130% increase in fly tipping during COVID is now reducing and returning to far lower levels. Brilliant work with the public protection order and the CCTV imagery work and the prosecutions on the back of those, and a good question about sustainability of both, but innovative approaches, which we know have been successful, which will ultimately displace. We know that, and displacement is always an issue with all crime, isn't it? As for Lower House Farm and opening hours, and Andy Wright, Councillor Andy Wright, has got a constant issue with people fly tipping outside the gates to Lower House Farm, which I think is a really interesting performance measure about whether the system is working or not. So people are going to the effort of turning up at Lower House Farm, and then they are dumping the rubbish because they can't get inside, and that says it all, really, doesn't it? So, members, I would recommend St Earth Recycling Centre, which is down in Cornwall, which is the best place I've ever been in my life, and the guys are really helpful. So that's a good model. If they can do it, I'm sure we can in Warwickshire.
With the price of petrol today.
Never had a problem.
Will cost you a fortune. Right, so thank you very much indeed. That concludes the discussion on agenda item number 6. Richard, you are welcome to stay, or if you feel you'd like to go and do further council work, you're more than welcome.
That's very kind of you at 7 o'clock. I'll probably do both. I think I'll stay and do a bit of further council work while I'm on. So if anybody's got any questions, if Jerry remembers what she was going to ask me, or you allow her to ask the question that she already had remembered, then I'm here if needs be, Chair.
Okay, thank you, Richard. Multitasking as ever, fantastic. Right, Julie, agenda item number 7.
Thank
The
you, Chair.
Community Safety Partnership update.
So this is quite a long report, and I take it that people have kind of read through the report. So I will just highlight some of the kind of key things. I've tried to follow the style of Robert's last report, having been fairly new to this role. So I'm just trying to make sure that I keep it in line. His report mainly focuses on the statistics that are contained in Appendix A, along with kind of the partnership plan updates. So I'll briefly go through some of the performance information. I think, being fairly new to this, I guess as well, it's quite clear that North Warwickshire is a very safe place to live and work. But I think there's also things that are always going to be trends, and then will come and go potentially on a seasonal basis, or for other issues. And so, under priority 1 around violent crime, I'm just flagging up 2 areas. Violence with and without injury offences, they remain above the 3-year average for the borough in Q2, and domestic abuse related violence without injury also remains a risk for the area. So this is a trend at the moment that is slightly going up. And again, as well, I understand that knife crime is also in Q2 above the 3-year average. But looking behind the issue, often this relates to domestic violence and domestic abuse, and it can relate to where that crime originated from. So it's just a word of warning there that sometimes when you're starting to look underneath the data, it's very, very specific what that's related to. So I think it's around domestic abuse. Around priority 2 and 3, I think we've just got some really good news, really, just to say. So acquisitive crime is, there was a predicted rise in acquisitive crime in Q2, but that's not materialised. So I think, this is a really good news story for North Warwickshire. And again, around rural crime, again, that's much lower in volumes than anticipated for this time of year. Priority 4 is around road safety. And in August, we saw a little bit of a spike due to 8 serious and 3 fatal incidences. So we have actually seen a spike in that, but there's quite detailed information as to why we've seen a spike in that, and we should get further information to quantify things. Then around reoffending, we're seeing a slight increase again with reoffending rates, and then in terms of our cross-cutting themes, domestic abuse still remains fairly high for the area. Exploitation is low and doesn't tend to be much of an issue. However, we're mindful that there has been 3 sexual exploitations of non-crime investigations, and we're just keeping our eye on that. Also, something that is an issue is the permanent fixed term exclusion rates for secondary schools in the area. This is higher than the Warwickshire average, and it's the highest rate within the county. So it's something, again, that we need to be mindful of. And then in terms of substance misuse, around adults, we see a trend around heroin, cocaine and alcohol, and around young people, we just see 1 referral in the last 18 months to Compass. Hate crime is also rising, and I think, alongside that, we've done some, and I'll talk about that in a moment, but in our appendix, there's some communications that we've done as part of the Hate Crime Awareness Week. So then moving on really to the partnership plan, I through the updates in terms of the actions that we're actually taking currently. So the first one to really note, which is it's very, very sad, is that we're going to see our first domestic homicide review take place in North Warwickshire. Following an incident, works in hand at the moment to appoint an independent chair to undertake that review, and police still have ongoing investigations underway. In terms of those domestic homicide reviews, we enter into like a county work in terms of contributing to those taking place across Warwickshire, so across all the districts. So we kind of have we're looking at funding proposals to find the best way to cover the cost of those reviews. And then just to say, we're still seeing a high referrals from around domestic abuse. And again, we're just entering into a period where we would often see a high spike because of seasonal celebrations and possibly alcohol and entertainment. So it's just to notice that. Working with our partner organisations, particularly the police, we have a partner problem solving plan, and we had a number of campaigns that I think have been reported to this board in the past. So there's been work around off-road bikes, Kirby Killee Farm and public sex environments. And I just really want to say that most of these have closed except for Kirby Killee Farm, and we've had 16 Section 59 notices and 3 bike seizures. I mean, that work's still going on and it will still continue to take place, but at the moment those projects have been closed down. Another really positive thing is that we're working on the street cruising injunction. Again, this is with barristers at the moment. The application is following legal advice after the judgment on a national case of injunctions against persons unknown. But as you all know, that we need to renew the injunction, so that's still with us and being prepared. Again, we've talked about the public space protection order that are working really, really well. I've mentioned about the hate crime week and the campaign that we've done. We have a multi-agency licensing enforcement meeting, and during the pandemic, that's not met. So that's going to start reconvene in November. So that's really positive. So that will be working well. And then the other kind of key areas, we're contributing to funding for particular roles around high-risk case management. So we're finding funding to support these roles. We have multi-agency task case management meetings to look at where there's risks with vulnerable residents. And we've got a whole range of things that we're doing there. And then the other kind of things I just want to quickly mention is the work of the Business Crime Advisor. That's going really, really well. We've also got Cyber Crime Advisor work, and they've just done some surveys with some young people. And then finally, I just want to mention the work that Warwickshire County Council are doing around safer streets. And so there's £250,000 of funding for safer streets. However, there is only £25,000 of funding that will be shared between Stratford and North Warwickshire. And so it's really important to have a conversation around that and identify locations that people feel are safe within North Warwickshire's area. At the moment, we've identified 8 locations through public consultation, and we would welcome more views around anywhere that people feel unsafe. The final kind of area that I just want to highlight is where a lot of our funding comes from. So this is funding from the Police and Crime Commissioner. And as you can see in the table in section 6, there's a number of projects listed there. So the first one is around youth education, addressing exploitation, particularly county lines and knife crime. So when I've highlighted again about the work around knife crimes, again, we're doing some prevention work and working with the schools to try and address some key things there. The £10,000 is towards the domestic abuse service. This is a specific project just for Warwickshire because of the number of referrals. The next area is the community safety projects and emerging trends. And I think it's really important to note there is funding available there that we can use to deliver some local projects, whether that be around fear of crime, safer streets, training, engagement, promotional work. And then the final one is around safer Warwickshire officers. So it's really sad to say that I think you had a very detailed presentation at the last meeting around this role. Unfortunately, we've been informed by Fire and Rescue that the project will now not go ahead, and due to unfortunate circumstances. But what I do want to stress was that funding that was allocated for that role of £5,000, it wasn't to pay for the post; it was to deliver projects. So it was what the officer was going to do, what projects they could initiate. So we have got £5,000 there that we can still, do future work, identify future activities going forward. So it's just to remind people that actually it wasn't for the post, it was for the project. So we need to be aware of that funding. So it's just really to raise awareness to that. And then one final thing is that the Police and Crime Commissioner has put forward a proposal to have a full-time post. Anyway, further discussions have taken place on this, and there has been a revised proposal for a part-time post that would be funded across Nuneaton, North Warwickshire and Rugby. I believe that this is still under consideration at the current time, and it's still with the Police and Crime Commissioner. But again, this might be another opportunity to get some more expertise into North Warwickshire and support. So I think just the final point was around partnership plan. That's an evidence-based led plan. And so that everything that we're doing is to address kind of the key concerns of keeping North Warwickshire a safer place to live. So I if there's nothing else, that I'd welcome any questions.
Okay, fantastic. So a lot of information in there. So let's break it down into the various subsections. So let me just give you an update on a couple of them, and then we'll throw it over to questions. So the first one, then, the final point that Julie raised, which was the discussion with the PCC about a shared rural crime officer. So we did have a rural crime officer, Carol Cottrell. Many of you may know Carol used to do a fantastic job and has done such a good job that she found herself being subsumed into Warwickshire Police and is now no longer working in North Warwickshire. She's working in the south of the county doing rural crime issues. The PC's proposal was that he would fund a model that could be jointly financed between North Warwickshire Borough Council, Eton and Bedworth Borough Council and Rugby Borough Council. So 4 boroughs contributing to employment costs of 1 individual and the PCC throwing a match contribution that would be equal to the contribution of 1 borough, if that makes sense. So question's always got to be with these things. What's the needs assessment? Do we have a needs-based assessment that shows that we have a problem in rural crime that we need to employ people for? And if you remember, members, the Safer Warwickshire or the Safer North Warwickshire assessment says our problem. It doesn't say our problem is rural crime, albeit we know we've got bending across the arms. At the meeting with the other that I attended with Evan Ross and with the other representatives from the council, none of the councils agreed to fund the Rural Crime Office project. The agreement was made, or the decision was made by each of the 3 councils, firstly on the basis that they hadn't got the money to commit to an employment of another individual. All 3 councils were facing cost-saving interventions, and the view was also raised, how could one person realistically be expected to operate across the rurality of North Warwickshire and Eton and Bedworth and Rugby? You know, you spend half your day driving down the A5 and waiting at long shoots. So the idea didn't go ahead. However, the PCC remained highly committed towards this post, so he's taken it away to now look at providing a part-time officer that he would fund, which, while we thanked him for his intervention, it's an interesting one, isn't it? Now, everybody okay with that? So my position has been, first of all, that North Warwickshire Borough Council doesn't have the money to commit to putting a £70,000 contribution into the employment costs of 1 individual working across 3 districts. And secondly, the model needs revisiting because it's just too great an area. We're expecting 1 individual to operate in. I mean, the other point I said was it's also the job of the safe neighbourhood teams, as far as I'm concerned. It's a policing matter, it's crime prevention intervention. You know, we've got the safer neighbourhood teams, so they should be doing this sort of work anyway. So if you're all happy with that, any questions? If not, we'll move on and we'll talk about the North Warwickshire officer.
I've got a question for this one, Joe.
Go on then, Alicia, and I've got you, Joe.
Firstly, I'd like to thank Julie on this report. I think it's a very good report. But she didn't mention section 6, knife crime, county lines, and also, you know, the concern in here of human trafficking, which brings me to page 14, 7/3. And it comes under cross-cutting theme, where it goes to permanent and fixed term exclusion rates for secondary schools in the borough are at some of the highest in Warwickshire.
Where are you reading this from, Dennis? Just say the reference again.
Yeah, page 14 on the agenda item we're on now.
Page 14. I've got page 14.
And above the county average, persistent absence from school is also an issue for the borough with the highest rates in the county for secondary schools.
All right.
Now,
So
if
is
they're
there-
not in
sorry to
school,
interrupt you. I've got some hard copy pages here and I haven't got a page 14.
7/3.
Is there another reference on that?
7/3,
7?
7/3.
7, thank you. Okay.
Now, if these children or youngsters are not in school, then surely they're vulnerable to all the things that's just been put in the report. And it's just a question of what are we doing, you know?
As a community sector partnership.
through the
Um,
community safety partnership. Yeah, are we
yeah.
working with the schools?
No, so we're not doing any interventions in North Warwickshire that are based around school exclusions. Albeit Warwickshire-wide, the youth offending service will be engaging with the schools, because as you quite rightly say, anybody that's not in school is at two risks. First of all, as being a victim.
Yeah.
And then secondly, of being a perpetrator and getting into perpetrator activities. So you'll have to excuse me, this was discussed at the last Safer Warwickshire Partnership Board, which is the Warwickshire-wide meeting, but I can't remember where the discussion went with it. Julie, have you got a detail on that one?
Yeah, it was just to say targeted youth who are part of Warwickshire County Council, they would be working with some of these young people, and they already are working with some of these young people. Again, you know, it's capacity, there's obviously capacity, but they do, targeted youth do attend quite a lot of the crime and disorder meetings and are part of, you know, discussions. So they should be very much aware of this ongoing issue.
Yeah, I'm just wondering whether we can't bring members back and update about any significant locations for exclusions, without wishing to create a massive piece of work. I don't know whether we could just touch base with the county council team and say, look, is there a particular school that we need to see whether we can't support with some interventions around limiting exclusion or targeted youth service to engage with these children when they're not in the school premises. We'll take one away as an action, and we'll come back to everybody. Okay with that? Okay, thank you. Jodie,
I just wanted to comment on Carol Cottrell and the amazing work that she's done, and how slightly frustrating it is when we get somebody so talented that has that big an impact, and it's our area that is ultimately going to lose out because her brilliance has been taken elsewhere and there's nothing to replace it. And I think you're right with the fact that the deal you were presented with wasn't functional at all for somebody to be working across this area. But it does now mean that we have got significant less tools to deal with the crime rate because of her hard work, which is frustrating and a little bit, yeah.
Well, it does, doesn't it? I mean, it is annoying because as we came up, North Warwickshire came up with the project in the first place and engaged Carol, whose greatest strength is her enthusiasm and work rate. And members will remember that she was awarded the British Empire Medal for her achievements, predominantly in North Warwickshire, a couple of 3 years ago. So without doubt, one woman force for crime reduction, without any doubt. So we do need to move forward. So I mean, part of that discussion, therefore, falls into the fact that we were going to try and do the Safer Neighbourhood Officer for North Warwickshire. If you remember the idea of that project that you had presented by Kieran Amos at the last meeting was about how do we empower an individual to start going into communities and coordinating multi-agency safety interventions in those communities, particularly drawing on resources like the fire service have got, where when the guys aren't fighting fires and they aren't deployed on tactical deployments or waiting for quick response to calls, they do have capacity to get into every home and start doing home safety assessments and doing other interventions. So I suppose on the note of the Safer North Warwickshire officer, first of all, I know that you will join me to wish Kieran, send Kieran our best wishes, because he has been unwell, seriously unwell. And unfortunately, as Julie has said, with his retirement, his immediate retirement from Warwickshire Fire and Rescue Service, the model of the Safer Warwickshire officer has gone with him. And the new chief doesn't feel that the organisation can deliver against that, which is a great shame. So we are left with this £5,000 at the partnership. And excuse me for being a bit detailed about this. So it's not the Safer Subs money, it's the Community Safety Partnerships money. So it's a partnership decision. But we can certainly put our heads together as a Safer Sub and think, right then, so if we've got £5,000 that needs to be committed, is there anything that we want to propose bottom up for the benefit of North Warwickshire, where we could do some work? And on a personal basis, I'm still taken with this idea about us generating some sort of multi-agency post who can come in and do project work in specific locations, because you'll remember that as a partnership, we have repeatedly attempted to empower our 26 parish councils to do problem solving. Even last year, we put £10,000 into a pot and said, give us a shout if you want some free money. And nobody has. So I know the problems are out there. I think it's just a question about how do we help people solve their own problems. And really the councillors and the clerks at parishes are already full on with the reality of delivering good services in local communities. So it's about how do we move it forward. Now, Major, so you gave me a shout.
Yeah, looking at this community safety grant, you got the domestic abuse services and local community safety project, but wouldn't mental health and well-being come into that somewhere? Because mental health is on the increase slowly, and that is like community safety. If we are involved with that, or is it another committee completely?
Yes, the police are running a project at the moment. The Warwickshire Police recognise that the vast majority of the people that they come into contact who are in some sort of trauma, whether it be victim or offender, have a mental health issue. And there is a great deal of work at the moment going on around initial triaging, first contact to get people immediate treatment, or for those that aren't showing signs of needing immediate mental health support, putting them into a care system which starts picking them up. Strangely, I've come to the...
Did you say through the police? Or
through the police. I've come here today straight from...
Well, it's councillors' responsibility as well to...
It is with the police.
Direction.
Absolutely, quite right. I've come here from a meeting of the Police and Crime Panel, which the Chief Constable addressed this afternoon, and we talked about this very thing. So I'm pleased to say I've come away feeling confident and positive that there are some good things going on, but recognising the point you make, Manager, that we've got to start thinking about how we prioritise that. And I think there is a review of Safer Warwickshire Partnership Board that is live at the moment. And I know that we've got a problem in North Warwickshire with domestic violence. It's always been our highest crime type, and in some communities, it's flagging on a county-wide basis because of the volume of domestic violence that's going on there. And we just need to sit down and think, are we doing the right thing? So we've been putting £10,000 into domestic abuse counselling services for the last 6 years, as far as I recall from the budgets here. And is it delivering still? Does it need a refresh? And can we move forward? So I think as we sit down and look at the review of the Safer Warwickshire Partnership Board, we should look at the review of what we do locally, and part of that should we be doing something different? Should we be funding a different intervention which delivers the same outcome? And Julie, you were flagging.
Yeah, it was just to say that from what I understand, and like I say, I'm fairly new to this role, but from what I understand in terms of the domestic abuse therapeutic counselling services, I understood that that's quite a holistic approach in terms of providing that wraparound care. So I would have thought that does pick up on the domestic abuse side, the kind of mental health agenda. I think it is there is quite a lot of work going on, and I don't know, not from a crime and disorder point of view, but Becky Evans also gets involved with quite a lot of health agendas. So I don't know, Becky, if there's anything at all that you wish to kind of add into this kind of discussion.
Yeah, I mean, through you, Chair. So there is the Health and Wellbeing Working Party. So I can have a word with Marion Humphreys, who is possibly taking over the chair of that group, and that can go on that agenda as a discussion point if the group's happy with that.
Yeah, if you would, then please, Becky, that would be great. Because without doubt, there's a whole theme of vulnerability around mental health, and it's also a perception issue, isn't it? Because obviously we are accommodating a number of people with significant mental health issues within our community, and they can be alarming to people within the community, which itself can raise concerns about them becoming further victims if they're frightening neighbours and frightening people. So it is a good one to pick up and just to put some more thought around. Jo?
Just kind of thinking about that, about the preventative measures. We have issues in Arley where it's been noted that there's sexual violence among the young people, and a lot of the girls don't even recognise it as a crime, let alone are willing to share or report it. And even when you're talking to somebody and they're saying, oh, we did this, and whatever it would happen to be, when you say actually that's a crime, that needs to be addressed. It's not recognised. Is there anything more that can be done in that prevention and kind of catching kids early and targeting the youth to actually improve the education of what domestic violence looks like, and potentially kind of stem some of the future cases? You know, obviously, if we're putting in £10,000 a year, there's questions around the impact of that £10,000, but also, are we doing anything to stop next year and next year and next year and kind of cut it off before it happens, or at least mitigate some of it?
Yeah, I think it's a good one. And I think it is time now with the review of the Safe Watch Partnership Board to ask for an update from the SWB officers that came to you about what interventions we're doing around prevention, young people interventions to educate them that violence in the home is not normality.
Yeah.
It's not acceptable. Can we come back with that one as well, please, Julie? And then once we get the results on that, we'll sit down and think about where we go with it, and if we can supplement it. Because, you know, I mean, as I've already said, it's the partnership's money, but bottom-up solutions are really useful, you know, because obviously they commonly identify ways in which partners can think differently and do different things and do them better. Okay. Before we finish this agenda item, I just want to have a quick chat about crimerate.co.uk. So there is an internet site that's flagging at the moment and going around on social media. And Major's helpfully forwarded me the link during the meeting. And it's obviously a really clever piece of computer program which is drawing on data that is on the internet and is available, reported crime data. Crimerate.co.uk, and Ray Jarvis raised it with me on Sunday, because the opening line on the first page talks about Atherstone, and it talks about Atherstone being the most dangerous small town in Warwickshire, and amongst the 20 most dangerous overall out of Warwickshire's 22 towns, villages and cities.
From where have they got that?
It's come from, I'm just looking, I've not looked
Sorry,
at
I
this
interrupted.
before, so I mean, let me just put this into some context. So every year we do a review of reported crime across the whole of North Warwickshire, and we get a strategic assessment. And the strategic assessment looks at reported crime, it looks at unreported crimes, and it comes back and tells us what the priorities should be. And we know from last year's strategic assessment, which was adopted by the partnership in April, that Atherstone stands out for one issue across the whole of, in comparison with the rest of the communities in North Warwickshire, and that is around domestic violence. So Atherstone Central Ward has more domestic violence than any other of the wards in North Warwickshire. Now those volumes are quite high, sufficiently high to make it flag, obviously. Now, on the back of that, part of the £10,000 commissioning is hopefully focusing on those, and we've also got some victim and perpetrator interventions going on that are looking at stopping people being repeat victims of domestic violence, because actually we also know from North Warwickshire that the percentage of our knife crime is domestic violence related because it happens in the kitchen, and the kitchen is full of knives. We also know that we've got a number of repeat victims in North Warwickshire, not only in Atherstone, but Girdwood is another community which shows high recidivism around domestic violence. So there are bits and pieces of work we've got to do. I think we're on it. I think we just need to be clearer at the Community Safety Partnership about how we intervene and what it is that we're doing that intervenes well. Julie has already told you that we've got our first domestic homicide review. The domestic homicide review is where there is a victim of domestic violence who's been in the system amongst the agencies, who has lost their life. Now, it doesn't matter, or it doesn't mean that they've lost their life through domestic violence. It just means that something has happened where they have passed away, and the whole purpose of the domestic homicide review is to look at the causal factors around that and how well agencies operate together. Were there any lessons to be learned from agencies not operating properly, because these are chaotic and alive environments. Running alongside the domestic homicide review is always criminal investigation, which will look at the criminal elements of the death and determine whether there is any violence or other behaviours that have resulted in that death. So it's a pretty significant issue for North Warwickshire to have our first. We're not by no means the only. There have been a number in Warwickshire. So far, we've done the first meeting where we've agreed that we need to appoint a domestic homicide review chair. The whole thing costs a lot of money that we've been paying into a system over a number of years now, so we'll get some of that money back. But I'll keep you cited, recognising that there are some personal issues, intensely personal issues for that victim's family going forward on that. So I've got Brian and I've got...
I was going to say that cuts away my question, I think, Jan. I was going to ask who it was or where it was or a few clues, but I don't wish to intrude or cause distress to other members of the family, so I'm quite happy not to ask the question.
All right, thank you, Brian. And I mean, you can imagine the whole element is covered in a whole area of...
I mean, it's been in the newspapers.
Absolutely. Well, it's a live criminal investigation as well at the moment.
All right, I'll say
so the whole thing again. Joe?
Just reflecting on negative headlines, and obviously the statistics that we've got on water statistics are quite shocking as well for this report, and kind of the negative headlines that are coming forwards. We've talked before about whether we can analyse the data anymore to find out whether it's improved reporting or what we're seeing in these spikes, and we don't still seem to be getting that intelligence through with it. But also along with that, there seems to be reductions in budgets, and I don't know if they're across the county, but we seem to be headlining on a number of fairly significant things. And even though the numbers are low, we are still looking at the smallest borough in the county kind of having some of the worst statistics. And that doesn't seem to be reflected in the support or the funding that we're being given.
Yeah, well, when I'm looking at the internet sites, I think that there are a series of issues that if you are having people show you this internet site, you've got to compare that. So I think this is year-on-year comparisons. So if it's year-on-year comparisons, we're coming on the back of the COVID period where figures such as domestic burglary and violence just absolutely and utterly hit the lowest levels that anybody has ever seen because people are at home all the time. In terms of violence, we know that violence went up. It was the one offence category together with fly tipping that went up during the COVID period. And you can work out the reasons why yourself if people find a home and they're having difficulties already. So I flagged this one because, and it relates to Joe's question as well, we've always got to be conscious, A, of the volumes in terms of the actual numbers, but B, that we're now in this strange period where we're coming from the quietest reported crime period in living memory. And to a degree, things are returning to normality. So I'm not saying normality is right, but the numbers are coming back to where they were pre-COVID. And there is a bit of a difficult journey there, but I can understand why Major and I can understand why Ray Jarvis, the Mayor, are concerned about this report. But all I would say with it is this isn't Community Safety Partnership's first document of reference. The first document of reference is the strategic assessment, which looks at crime over the last year, crime over a 5-year trend, identifies hotspots, identifies key interventions, and makes some proposals that the group commissions against. But it's interesting, isn't it? It's an alarming headline to say that. And actually, everything that we see here in North Warwickshire doesn't tell us that Atherstone is the most dangerous place in Warwickshire. It's a really clever piece of programming. I'm deadly impressed with it. And we now need to go away, Julie, and just have a look at that and work out what we can do, because particularly if it's being flagged in communities, it's going to have a confidence issue. Yeah, Julie, you're going to say something?
It was something I should have probably said right at the beginning of this, was that the performance report that you've received, and obviously I've not seen them before, but the performance report you've received should be slightly different to previous ones. And the reason they've done that is they put this 3-year average in, and that is to try and address, they're not saying it's going to work, but it's to try and address the issues surrounding the pandemic and the reporting of data. So that's why they've introduced the 3-year average in this performance report. So I apologise, I should have raised that right at the beginning, but it's just to help get better understanding of the data and how meaningful that data can be going forward.
Okay, yeah, well, that's all right. So has anybody got any further comments to make on either the documented papers or the discussion that we've had in general? Brian?
Chairman, this is perhaps a question of geography. You mentioned at the very beginning the injunctions on car cruising. Hams Hall, Ambassador's Pole, I should know this, is in North Warwickshire.
Hams Hall, yeah, and
Yeah,
Bassett's Pole.
I know Hams Hall is, yes. Yes,
And Bassett's Pole is as well. So
Yes.
Bassett's Pole's
And
the
there were no
edge of the
others.
boundary.
no, that's clarified it for me, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Right, members, any other questions, or should we move on to the next agenda item? Okay, then, thank you. Let's move on to the next agenda item in your pack. I'm now getting my pages all confused. This is agenda item number 8, which is the North Warwickshire Improving Road Safety Action Plan. Julie.
Thanks, Chair. So this report seems to have been affected by really the pandemic. So again, I'll just highlight some of the kind of key things. So in taking on this role, from what I understand is that the progress has been limited in terms of taking forward the kind of key projects. And there's two things that I kind of want to highlight. The first one was around the road safety grant and funding of bikeability. So again, this was a grant that was awarded to Colston and Kingsbury schools to deliver bikeability training. And again, because of lockdown and other restrictions, that's actually not taking place. So I think where we're at with that is that we need to get on and deliver that. We need to go back to the Police and Crime Commissioner, confirm the details around Colston and Kingsbury School and try and get that moving again. So it's really just to say that limited progress, well, no progress has been made, but we want to make that move forward. The second, section 5 is really, I think, information that's been shared with you previously, and that's around the Road Safety Fund that was enabled by the Police and Crime Commissioner to provide families who have suffered a bereavement or serious injury extra support. So again, I think you received information about this in the past, so I won't go into any detail, but that's one-to-one support following somebody who's been affected by a road collision or family. Section 6 of the report, again, relates to Speed Watch, and this is something that is starting to be looked at again. So again, further delays because of COVID, but it's just a report that that is going to be revisited and considered going forward. So the main part of this report, I think, is around section 7, which is around the Warwickshire Road Safety Partnership, which is the main partnership, addressing this agenda. And I just want to highlight some of the key things that were reported in the October meeting. The focus is around their partnership strategy. So this will be around safe roads, safe road users, safe speed, safe vehicle, and post-collision response. And that's what kind of they're looking at as part of their strategy. The second bullet point was around school parking. A survey received 4,000 responses. They're revisiting those survey responses and looking at what the parking concerns are and what implementations they need to look at across Warwickshire. The third one's around e-scooters. Again, working with schools, trying to look at a campaign around this. A campaign was run last year, so they're looking to revisit that same campaign this November. But they also want to talk to schools about what resources would actually help them around e-scooters. So, and then the other final points are around speed concerns, a partnership website, and some work that they've done around remembrance service. I think it's really important to see how many people are actually accessing the partnership website. So again, 2,180 visitors, 51% linked to social media, Facebook, Twitter accounts, very active. So again, it's about how do we generate some of those kind of key messages? How do we get messages out, on this particular issue around road safety, but, again, on other issues. So it's just looking at the best ways in which we should be communicating to make a difference in the community. And then just finally, some of the things we've already mentioned tonight, but just to make sure that I cover it under this report, in terms of the North Warwickshire Action Plan, again, obviously we've got higher levels than normal around our performance indicators because of those 8 serious and 3 fatal incidences around road collision. Again, I've just mentioned the Community Speed Watch scheme is going to be re-established. Our street cruising injunction is being taken forward, and we're looking at obviously road safety considerations because of our high profile around planning applications. So apologise, there's probably not a lot of progress being made substantially around this area, but things that seem to be getting back to normal following the pandemic. And I think by the next report, we should see a lot more information being shared on this area. If there's any questions.
Okay, thank you. I mean, you know, road safety continues to be a priority for this group. It continues to be a priority for the Road Safety Partnership, and actually it's a priority for North Warwickshire. We're a council in our corporate plan as well. Since we last met on the 28th of June, I'm aware of 2 fatalities that happened in North Warwickshire, one on the A5 just past Birch Coppice, and another one on the A446 just outside Curdworth. So we're still getting them on the roads. And I know we've got a lot of road in North Warwickshire, but it's still important that we continue to have it as a priority and to do all we can. Brian, I've got you there.
Chairman, DC scooters are getting more of a problem. In Kingsbury, 4 went past my house together. They can come how they like, but they seem to come in the boots of cars with mum and dad, park at the water park, and then zoom off everywhere. I also, as I mentioned earlier, just been to Poland. They are everywhere. Where you can ride them, I don't know. They ride them on the streets, the pavements, everywhere. And they're frightened because they're silent, and they come up behind you, and they're quite alarming. And I had one nearly hit me the other day, and I shouted, "Careful." And the woman replied in English, she said, "I'm sorry." She said, "I've had no instructions." She said, "I just picked this up, scanned my mobile into it and got it." And she said, "You know, I'm not very good at it." No, madam, you're not, sort of thing. But, and when they've finished and hiring them, they could put them in dedicated stands. They could lean them on, or no, they just chuck them on the pavement. They really are a dangerous switch.
And this is in Poland, not in North Warwickshire.
Yeah. We get. I'm predicting how we get. Also, another one. There was one parked outside my house, and I couldn't. It's a key motorcycle. I couldn't help admiring it. And the chap came up to me, "What do you think of it?" And I hesitated to say it wasn't legal. It had no pedals, and it wasn't a scooter. It was, in fact, an electric motorbike. It had suspension. It must have cost a great deal of money. But there he is riding a motorbike. I mean, it doesn't matter whether the motor's electric or petrol any more than it does with car. And they seem to be just getting it. The police, we did mention at Parish Council, and they said, we're not making a song about it. He said, but we have quietly taken some off people. So, fair enough.
Brian, I think you make a good point, don't you, about the risks of electric scooters, the risks of the people riding them, because I keep seeing people who haven't got helmets on.
Yes.
You come off those and you're guaranteed a head injury, which could potentially be life-changing, but also the risk to other people that are on the road and on the footpaths where these things are coming behind you at 20 miles an hour, and if they hit you, they're going to hurt you.
Yes.
So at the moment, I'm not aware of any accidents in North Warwickshire that involved electric scooters, but it's certainly something we have to keep on the flag. So are you making a proposal then with our remaining 10,000, we send you off around Europe looking for strategic opportunities?
Could I have expenses as well?
Cut that out.
Okay. All right. So there's some great work going on now across Warwickshire around road safety, but you know, we've still got a campaign about this because we've had our fair share and we continue to get our fair share. Jo?
Yeah, just to kind of add to the frustrations and the priorities, this is something that I'm heavily involved in my ward. There's a campaign in Anstey Common around the death of Harley Jackson and the speed campaign. And there's also been a campaign in Anstey on Birmingham Road, both of which we have been told are technically mean compliant with the speed regulations, so there is no priorities to anything. The project that I'm working on in Anstey Village, the residents have organised a campaign and organised funding to improve the infrastructure of the road, and they've still been waiting nearly 2.5 years for an implementation of that, even though they're paying for it themselves. And in Anstey Common, where obviously poor Harley was killed nearly 2 years ago, despite the fact that the data, the raw data for the speed watch shows that I think 65% of road users are above 30 miles an hour or above. And despite the fact that there are recorded speeds of 60 and 70 miles an hour during 7 o'clock in the evening times, though we've been told by county council officers that they have 100 such roads and only the funding to do something about 3 or 4 of them, which is pretty shocking. And then to actually kind of looking at statistics, we are the only area that didn't see a reduction during COVID times, and we're now seeing further spikes. And although, yes, we can say the spike was an August spike and it's out of character, there are previous August spikes, even during COVID. So those spikes are to be expected. And what we're actually seeing is a rising incident with very little action. And again, going back to the point that we have got the 4 most dangerous junctions, we are a significant risk factor in KSIs in the entire county, let alone in the borough. And we just don't seem to ever be able to combat it, even when residents want to pay for it themselves. We can't combat it and we can't get action.
Yeah, your points are spot on. I mean, I'm just sitting here thinking really about community speed watch, and we're never getting good at this in North Warwickshire. So we paid for speed cameras, we paid for equipment, we've had schemes set up, and then the schemes haven't worked. We've got into the complexities about strategic health and safety assessments about where the speed watch can be done. And I do think it's something we need to revisit again. I mean, because I know we bought a speed gun for Water Auckland, which cost us the best part of £15,000. So we probably do. We just need to reorder. Was it 1,500 quid? It might have been 1,500. We just need to reorder what we bought previously. Just go back to Warwickshire Police and ask for some clarity strategically around where we are with their support for community speed watch, because as everybody knows, Warwickshire Police and West Mercia Police were 2 merged organisations, and the alliance has come to an end and they're split. And part of the problem has been that a number of services were being run by West Mercia Police in that alliance, and when the split happened, they've remained in West Mercia. So we could probably do with an update about where Warwickshire is, and North Warwickshire in particular, with community speed watch and how Warwickshire Police are continuing to facilitate it. Best point of call for that will be Alison to start with, but we could go higher if we need to. We could take it to the road safety tactical group that you are now a member of. Yeah?
Yes.
Yeah, okay, brilliant. Anything else on road safety? And yeah, Denise?
Just to pick up on Jodie's point, as you know, we was all ready to go up and running in Manchester and Ridge Lane. The parish council got all the people ready, they'd bought the old vises, with Euro, all the machines was all there and everything. And then, of course, COVID come. Then we heard again that somebody had specifically been employed to do it. And I don't believe they've heard anything since.
Yeah, I mean, we can circulate the emails. I get some very nice emails now which talk about everything, but it doesn't relate to anything we're doing, to be quite honest. Okay. All right, thanks for that. Everybody happy with agenda item number 9? Okay, that takes us to number 8, rather. It takes us on to number 9, which and the chairman's update. So I put this on the agenda just basically to have a chat and see what people feel. But the Community Safety Partnership have agreed that perceptions of safety and fear and crime would be a priority for us this year. We've got to the stage where we've got some agreement from the Warwickshire County Council community safety officers on the back of the Have Your Say survey that they would give us a help with moving forward on looking at some local interventions in North Warwickshire to better understand why people are worried about crime when those concerns appear to be disproportionate to the amount of crime that's going on. And part of the question was, is there something we could do about that? And part of that solution may have been the safer North Warwickshire officer that isn't going forward now. So I suppose that as I sit here as the chair of the partnership, I'm a bit lost about where we go with this now. If Warwickshire County Council community safety officers are saying they can't service our request for information and support around this area, Now, we all know that streetlights have been the major concern for communities about their perceptions of safety for a long time in North Warwickshire. And we know that there's some great work being done by Councillor Margaret Bell to get streetlights turned on and paid for by Hartshill Parish Council. So I think that maybe we need to sit down and just have a revisit about this agenda for the whole of North Warwickshire. And it feels a bit strange that a parish council should raise its own tax precept and have to spend it on turning streetlights on when actually that is part of the county council calculation for the Highways Authority's precept requirements. However, it is something to do. Now, I was hoping that we would be able to get a perception survey up and running in Manchester before the streetlights were turned on, so we could get a baseline and then do a mid survey and then do an end survey if the streetlights went off and just see what the rules were. But Kerry tells me tonight that the lights are now on, so we've missed the opportunity to get in there and do the perception survey before they were actually turned on. But Kerry, as I understand it, Hartshill Parish are paying £3,000 a year.
That's great.
Which is incredible, isn't it?
Yeah.
So it's one for us to think about, I think, and unless anybody's got any suggestions or ideas about how we deal with that wider perception survey issue around making people feel safer in North Warwickshire, leave it with me. It's in the core plan for the borough, which will come to the next full council. So I'm pleased that our chief executive officers are taking perceptions of safety seriously, and it's in there. But we just need to have a think about, all right, from local bottom-up problem solving, what is it that we should be doing as elected members to start tackling or start helping people feel better. Jo, you got your hand up?
Yep. I think it's really important to tackle fear of crime, but I think one of the balance that we need to get is that in some areas we have people that don't recognise crime or don't report crime, and I think that is also, kind of educating people about their rights and what level of criminality they can not expect,
yes,
but should be expecting. So I know that I've been reading one of the reports about Kingsbury about broken glass in the park and how the police will be visiting more, whereas actually in some of my parks that's a daily experience. Nobody reports it because it's a daily experience. And I think that kind of setting a standard for what people can actually expect, and kind of a baseline, or to kind of encouraging people to get more involved in kind of not only recognising that as a crime, but actually doing something about it, and kind of knowing that there are avenues to be more proactive in addressing it locally, such as Neighbourhood Watch or through other things. Although I know Neighbourhood Watch don't deal with antisocial behaviour, but kind of giving people the tools to actually address it themselves and empowering people, I think, is as important as recognising the fear of crime.
Well, without doubt, I mean, your point about what's accepted as being normality in the community is a really good one, and everybody's heard of zero tolerance, or you've heard the phrase zero tolerance. Well, that backs on to a crime theory called the broken window syndrome. And some of you will know the broken window syndrome, i.e. that if you want to stop a community going into decline in terms of how that community perceives itself and the people that live in there and invest with their businesses and invest with their families, then there are certain signal indicators that you need to say, right, well, we've now reached the tipping point, and one of the tipping points there is broken windows. And when I was first looking at this, I was working in Aston, Birmingham, and it was a real wake-up call, to be honest, because I'd gone to a meeting, which was a Birmingham-wide meeting, where at Harbour there was a concern about one of the shop windows in Harbour being broken, and everyone was saying how it brought the tone of the area down, and it was unacceptable. It created a lot of community comment, and yet when you went down to Aston, and it reflects Joe's comment, you went down to Aston, all the windows broken. But it was a different area of tolerance, and it was the complexity of the problems down there were greater. But that's not to say in any way that you should accept all the windows being broken in Aston. Because it's perception, isn't it? How does the area look? It looks bloody awful. So how can you make the area improve? And if we're saying that broken glass and criminal damage is a normality in some communities in North Warwickshire, then as we move forward, maybe we should be thinking about how do we identify small locations that are manageable and start saying, all right, well, how do we bring those locations up in terms of making sure that there is no glass there, making sure that visible things that are damaged are repaired if they are public property, obviously. I don't know, it's some thinking to do around it, isn't it, Major?
Yeah, I mean, right now in Anderston, the police have asked me to get the lights switched on at part of Sheepy Road, Rowland Way, because of Christmas period, heavy good vehicles come into town. Well, last year they were coming straight into town. So the lights will lit up the signage so the lorry drivers can see them. So I'm in talks with county at the moment, whether they will switch them on or not. I do not know yet, but they will reply back. But the police have asked for the lights on. So we've got the police backing. They want them on. So now it's up to county if they're going to switch them on or not for the Christmas period.
Yeah, well, you've got to get that Coca-Cola wagon into Anderston, haven't you? There'll be uproar if that doesn't turn up. So I mean, I think you make a good point, don't you? But let's not forget that the police have got the authority in the current arrangements to have the streetlights turned on.
Yeah.
It's just that the police, I'm always amazed at how responsibly Warwickshire Police exercise that authority. Because I'm not saying I'm an irresponsible individual, but I have the lights on all the time. You know, but Warwickshire Police obviously do manage that. So good luck. I'll be interested in the update about those discussions there. But let's not forget that all they've got to say is that we believe, and it is down to PCSO and constable level, we believe that there's a road safety or community safety risk, and you can negotiate having the lights turned on for a period. You know. Anyway, Kerry, you got your hand up.
Yeah, just two things. One on the street lights. I mean, as a resident of Harts Hill, I'm appreciative of going on. I always think county's argument is it costs too much to have them switched on for that period of time when nobody's out and about. They've all been switched over to LED lights, so I don't actually think the costs are as great as county makes them out to be, but I think we all know that anyway. Secondly, in the perception of fear, I find that on the group pages that I'm involved in on Facebook, that a lot of the things that are coming through at the moment are people having CCTV cameras and complaining that people are going around checking door handles of houses and cars and damaging cars willfully. Now, the fear is there now because people are reporting it on Facebook and it's there. I asked the question, was that not happening before we were getting observations through camera equipment? Now, I'm not saying it's not a problem. It is a problem. But the fear is being exacerbated through social media if it was already occurring. We don't know because we don't have the statistics to back that up. So I'm not saying we can't take it off social media, but are these cases being reported first of all to the police rather than being put onto the social media web pages?
And it's a great point, isn't it, that technology is moving so fast. I mean, who would have thought 5 years ago you could get a doorbell which had got a CCTV camera which would play your phone, you know, come back on your phone and tell you there was somebody at your door. And of course, you don't know what you don't know until you don't know it. And suddenly you find out that there's always people standing on the front of your doorstep. And when you were at work, you never knew that. But now
the American senator said that first.
You know, I know he did. So I think it's another good one, Kerry, that when we look at the perceptions, we just need to perhaps Julie make sure that having you think about technology and the impact of technology on people's perceptions. Now, I've seen the Facebook posts that go viral where somebody's got a picture from the doorbell and then a neighbour's had a break in, and obviously everybody immediately assumes that guy on that doorbell was the guy that did the burglary. And you know, the last time I saw that in Water Auckland, which is the world that I represent, the guy on the doorbell was a window cleaner. You know, poor fellow had been flagged. And it's important. It's interesting, isn't it? It's technology's changing the way that people are perceiving and people are thinking, and we need to make sure that we're keeping up to date with it, as you quite rightly say. So one for us to think about if we do the intervention. Joe?
Partly playing devil's advocate on this one, but isn't that just demonstrating actually that it's not a fear of crime, that the crime is actually there if we've got evidence showing people going around trying animals? So there is a flip side to this, that actually that fear of crime that we're saying isn't actually real fear. If we've now got the evidence to show that, not with the window cleaner, obviously, but if you've got the evidence to show people going around, then actually the crime is there. That maybe, I always think the wording, the fear of crime, makes people feel as if maybe they're being paranoid or just imagining it, and it's a bit condescending. So I'm not particularly fond of the wording, but actually what we're seeing now is evidence. But it's not just a fear of crime, there is the crime. It's just they've managed to avoid it. But my second point was, I love the idea of having kind of projects that you can demonstrate what impact it's having. So if you've got a small area like a park or something, or you're saying about up-levelling it, I think that would be a really good way to actually positively feed in some stories. If you say, you know, this was the picture and actually we've got this intervention, I think those headlines would be really positive. And again, if you're looking at fear of crime, but if you're looking at improving people's perceptions of the area they live in, then those things would be a really good target points.
Okay, well, if everybody's happy, let me go away and think about it. Let me talk to Safe and Watch Partnership Board about their remodelling of how they're proposed to do business. And if that gets adopted at the next Safe and Watch Partnership Board meeting, then we'll look at it, because there certainly is an option to say, okay, then well, let's do some crime analysis mapping of North Warwickshire and see if we can identify key locations where we should be investing in. Never mind you going to Poland, mate. I was part of a team of 3 who won the FBI's best analytical project in the world, and we got a free trip to America to go and get the award. But that was based on.
Oh, my brain wouldn't pay for me to go that far.
Yeah, that was based on a project that just overlaid different partners' information and said, oh, where's everybody working in the same location? Why aren't you all working together if you're working on these same streets? And the amazing thing was, across the whole of Birmingham, came down to 5 or 6 small groupings across Birmingham, a city of 1 million people, where there were 3 or 4 streets that interlinked, and yet all the agencies were putting all their time and effort independently into dealing with interventions in those communities. So maybe on a lesser scale, with our £10,000 that we've got uncommitted, we can go away and see whether we couldn't at least commission some additional crime survey work from reported incidents, and then we'll look at some of these news sites that are coming up on the internet and see whether from non-reported we can pick up a flavour. Because I mean, the other thing I heard this week is that Warwickshire Police have got some sort of a programme going where they're asking people to tell everyone where they feel unsafe. So we need to find a bit more about that, Julie, because
there's a survey.
Yeah, because clearly that information itself will be identifying key locations, as long as nobody's corrupting the data by making 1 million phone calls about one location, and trying to get investment in their areas. If it's being done properly, we'll get some really good feedback. So Julie's got another action just to log on to that project and just find out what the results are coming from there. So perhaps at the next meeting of this group, we have fear of crime as a key agenda item, or perceptions of safety, if you don't like the word, the title, so perceptions of safety. And we just put our thinking caps on and just think, okay, then well, as members and as a borough council, what options are there, if there are any? You okay with that? Yeah, a bit different to being a scrutiny function, a bit more proactive, but I feel there's a value in it if everybody's happy. Yeah. Julie?
Can I just add one thing there? And I think it's something that kind of links into the work of the community development team. But, because we do talk about climate kind of in its negative kind of sense. And there is that element of where,